Hello everyone. My name is Yota Kawashima, and this is Let's Discuss a Paper Soon After Reading It. And in this podcast on YouTube recording, we are going to discuss a paper which we selected just 2 hours ago. Yeah, so today we are going to discuss a paper, local neuro-relational structure underlying the contents of human conscious experience. The author is Malach, and 2021 Neuroscience of Consciousness. And today we have 2 participants, Aniko and Ryuichi. Aniko, can you introduce yourself first?
Yeah. So I'm Aniko Kustor, and I'm a PhD student at Monash University.
Okay, thank you. Then Ryuichi.
Hi, I'm Ryuichi Watanabe. I'm a PhD student at Kyoto University.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned, we are going to discuss a paper written by Rafael Malach. And first, I'll give you just a quick summary of this paper. This is review or just a proposal paper, and the author proposed a way of thinking or the local functionalism approach on conscious experience. And what it means is that, so some theory of consciousness assumes that the large-scale global activity or distributed activity is important or necessary for generating conscious experiences. But in this paper, the author says that for a specific content of consciousness, you need only a local activity. And that is the local structuralist perspective. And so first, for local structure or local cortical region to generate specific conscious content, it need to satisfy 3 criteria. That is functional selectivity, lesion-associated loss of function, and conscious moderation by electrical stimulation. And what it means is that, so first, that region should be active when a specific, the content or stimulus are presented, but should not active when it's absent on other, the category of stimulus are presented. That's the functional selectivity. And the second is that when the region gets damaged, the related experience should be lost. That's the region-associated loss of function. And the last, conscious moderation by electrical stimulation. This is related to the region-associated loss of function, but the idea is that when the region is artificially stimulated by an electrical stimulation, then it should affect or positively or negatively impact the content of consciousness on the specific category. And that's the 3 criteria for the for a region or for a local, connectivity to generate a specific conscious content. And next, the question is that, okay, then why such kind of region encode or generate that specific content of consciousness? That's the question. And in this paper, or the author says that he motivated by linguistic research, where one or meaning of a word is defined by its relation to other words. For example, if you want to define water, should be considered, or not the letter itself or the pronunciation or things like that, but the relation to other words, for example, let's say ice or fire or things like that. And that kind of network of words or the relation define the meaning. Given this idea, the author proposed that the information should be defined by the relation with other content, in a sense. So, for example, in this paper, they use, or he used the face as an example. So, for example, in the face case, and neurons in fusiform face area is active when the face is presented. So that satisfies the criterion. And then the cluster of neurons in FFA shows different pattern of activation when different face are presented. If you want to define a specific content of consciousness of the face, then you need to consider the relation of activity with other face. And in this paper, he introduced a word called relational geometry. And this is a set of similarity or distance between all possible activation patterns. By introducing this concept, he explained how a specific region can encode the information. And after that, he introduced explain how or what kind of physical mechanism can generate that kind of complex network of content of consciousness. And here he proposed a lateral synaptic connection as a candidate. And specifically, the activation and called neural ignitions. So basically, a burst of firing rate in the local lateral synaptic connection is important for generating a specific content of consciousness. And then he proposed or raised two possibilities of the importance of ignition-like activity. And the first one is the bursting activity is necessary for binding information. That's the one possibility. And another possibility is that the bursting activity is important to broadcast that information to higher order area for other cognitive functions such as decision-making, things like that. And overall, in this paper, the author proposed a way of thinking called a local structuralist perspective. And the idea is that not the distributed activity in the brain, rather the local activity is sufficient to generate a specific content of consciousness. And what makes such region have specific content is basically determined by the activity pattern and its relation to other activity pattern. And that's the summary of this paper. If you want to add anything, Aniko, Ryoichi, can you do it now?
Okay, I agree with your summary.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add?
Okay, so we are going to discuss this paper from now on. Do you have anything, Ryuichi or Aniko? Any comments or question on this paper?
Yeah, so something that was a bit unclear for me is that whether this localized proposal or structure, does this refer to sensory information only, or like only the sensory cortices? Because I think in many cases the author discusses the distinction between the prefrontal cortex and the potential role of the prefrontal cortex and other regions versus this localist perspective, as far as I understood. And yeah, so this was a bit unclear for me. Like, do you know, or did you understand it? What does this theory exactly describes?
Okay, so as far as I know, the paper explained not the sensory information, I think somewhere, but I just can't remember where it is. And so Ryuichi, do you know where it is, or do you have the same question as Aniko?
Yes, yes. I also have this same question. Yeah. So local, what local means? For some, for example, the sensory. And I think in this paper, the local. I don't know about the local is not only the sensory area. So I also wondering. So sensory area only, or but and they also wanted to say not the global network. So I'm wondering.
Sorry, I remember that he mentioned about it somewhere, but I can't pick it now. So if you have any other question, and while you are discussing on that, I can check the paper. What do you think?
I mean, so yeah, I think you can do that. We can perhaps discuss a bit, because I think we have a slightly different questions. I do also have this question: what does local mean? Like how large a local, does it refer to the category of the perceptor, like the conscious experience? But then it is quite vague or hard to understand. And of course, there are different types of sensory stimuli. So some of them, like a face, maybe have a more clear, functional region in the brain, but maybe other conscious contents don't have this kind of, I don't know, neatly separated functional section in the brain that you can identify. So yeah, I was kind of thinking about counterexamples, and I understand that the face example is just an example, but I think this is a very good example for this kind of approach, and there are many potential other concepts, I don't know, like so many other kind of conscious experiences or conscious, the content of consciousness that I think would be more difficult to fit into these localized neural or find their neural basis.
Okay, so first, I could not find that part, but as far as I can tell, the definition of their local is whether the region satisfies the three conditions, and it does not mean anything about the spatial range or things like that. And that's my first comment. And another one is that, or yeah, probably it's not related to your question or comment, but what they mean is they or he said that the global activity is just a consequence of the fact that the conscious experience usually have many dimensions. For example, while you are watching a video or movies, and the movie contains visual information, audio information, and emotional information, and things like that. And that is reflected as the global activation. Yeah, and this is not answering to your question, rather just comment or the supplementary information. Yuichi, do you want to say anything?
Yeah. So also in this paper, they also use as example is phrase processing, and so in this in the example, the future form face area or higher order visual area is the one local. The author wanted to say, right? And in the future form areas and the up person's representational how to say activation, and this sorry, the ignition of the up person's face in the future form area means local ignition, and this makes the face conscious perception, right? It means local ignition or local theory or something.
Sorry, can you rephrase your question again, or I couldn't understand. So you are asking what is the local ignition, or?
Yes. So no, yes, and I think, and as you said, the author didn't define which area is local, right? And the authors used the future form area or higher order visual area as one of the local network, and they also used the face perception and the future form face area as the ignition of the local area, right? This is my confirmation.
Okay, so your question is that when they say local bursting or local ignition should confine within that local area, local area. Is it your question, right? It's your question, right? Okay. Yeah, I think I think so again, they mentioned the possibility of the role of ignition in this paper. And then one example is binding. And here, it's, how do you, define bindings? Might answer your question. For example, again, if you are talking about the, example of movie, as I mentioned, it contains visual information, audio information, and emotional information. And these, three information should be represented or encoded in spatially different three, local areas. But your, conscious experience should be unified. You should have only one conscious experience. So these three information should be binded. And if the ignition is important for binding, then the ignition in three, different regions is required. Not only, one specific regions, but across three local regions. That's my understanding, or maybe I misinterpret this paper, but does it help you to understand this paper? Okay, so if that's the case, then that's fine. Aniko, do you have any questions?
Oh yeah, maybe one more question. So the author spends quite a lot of time discussing the potential correspondence between artificial processing with using deep convolutional neural networks and the implementation in humans. And I was a bit unsure, or yeah, I didn't quite understood the role of that section or the argument there. Like, is it just kind of an additional way to support that the geometry of stimuli is important, or like the similarity structure, or yeah, this kind of geometrical approach is useful? Yeah, am I correct that that was the important takeaway there?
I think I can answer your question. And the reason why, demonstrate the example result from a neural network or artificial neural network is that their question was, okay, some specific region is important, or some local region is important for conscious generating a specific conscious content, conscious experience. But is that configuration is by accident, or is there any developmental constraint? That's there, or that's, yeah, was the question they tried to answer by showing or the result from artificial neural network. And I think their claim is that, okay, so if you train, or when you have a neural network, artificial neural network, first you need to train, right, for the model to have a specific function, let's say classifying, categorization. And after that, you can see that kind of configuration. And that suggests is that the network, or even in the brain, the local activity, or the network or connection in a local area is not by an accidental, thing, but rather, if you want to, or want the region to have a specific function, the connection should be like that. Or does it answer your question? I'm not sure, but.
I guess I guess what I don't understand is like what would be the alternative, or so they basically argue that these different levels of the visual perceptual hierarchy are not accidental, right? Because they seem to also be repeated or recapitulated by neural networks as well. But then how does that explain you know, consciousness or the content of consciousness?
Okay, so my answer is that does not answer why question, I think. But rather, let's say if you have some, again, an artificial network model or some neural model, and then, you know, force them to have a specific function, you will have some trained or weighted network. And even within that network, you can still see the, you know, the geometry, relational geometry. And that can imply that the information is, you know, encoded solely by a single, you know, concept, but rather the relation with other possible, you know, concepts. That's my understanding. And again, this is not explaining why it has or supposed to have or generate a conscious experience.
Yeah, sorry to push for a bit more in this direction, but like, what is the alternative? How can we not use some kind of relational structure? How can you falsify a claim that this system uses a relational structure to extract information?
Probably one way is showing a system that function well, but do not encode the relational informations. Does it answer your question? I'm not sure, but let's say if you again have a network that classify category, let's say image category, like object category, and then within that network, you can check the similarity of patterns. And if we can find some network that have the exact same function, but do not preserve the relational, you know, geometry of activation, then it means that the relational geometry is not important for encoding that information. I'm not sure whether I'm not answering your question, but
I mean, I guess you do, but yeah, I find it difficult to actually think about this in a practical manner. Like how would that look like? What else would that system use? But I guess I just have to think about this a bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. Whether it's practically, you know, plausible or not, that's a question. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Okay. So if you do not have any other question or comments on this paper itself, we can go a bit beyond from here. I think one thing, what I feel interesting is that this paper is quite similar to, this Korea structure project, right? And now wrote some paper how we can use, relational structure to connect the Korea space and, neural space and computational model space, things like that. But he did not, cite Nao's paper. So I found it interesting because, like, some people started to have the same idea, just independently. Probably that implies that, this approach is, something, important, or I don't know how to explain, but but anyway, yeah. So my impression is that this idea is really similar to Korea structure approach. That's just my comment. So do you have anything, or do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, so I agree, but I also think that in this paper, it seems like a bit more limited, or like it's a smaller and more narrow scope. Because I think the main, I guess the main idea is actual, like looking at actual neural distances, right? So what I understood that is basically like within this localized area, the neurons create a geometry, a relational geometry, and so that seems like something that is also like anatomically there, right? And I think in case of the qualia structure, or in case of Nao's ideas, I'm not sure actually if he's agreeing with this kind of limitation, or not limitation, but this kind of specification of actual neurons representing this distance, right?
So as far as I know, he mentioned, or as I remember that he, says that probably you can find some kind of structure in the brain. I mean, he used, or he likes the example of the tone, the spiral structure of tone, or, audio. And then that kind of, structure can be, found in the brain, or anatomically speaking. So that kind of, structure can be mapped on the brain. Not sure whether how local it is, but I think he kind of agree with this idea overall. But the, one different, thing is that in Korea structure project, first you record the brain activity, and then from there you decode some information, let's say using integrated information theory or things like that. So the brain activity should be transferred or transformed into another domain, and then we need to find a match between the Korea structure domain and that domain instead of the brain activity domain itself. So that's a bit different from this paper. But I feel this paper is also related to representational similarity analysis by Krieger-Skolte, because here Malach, he used the similarity, dissimilarity, and saying that all possible combination of or the similarity or dissimilarity among all possible pairs of content is important, and that's strongly related to the RSA analysis. So in that sense, I don't know whether I get something new from this paper, because I already know Now's idea, and also here is talking about the Krieger-Skolte's RSA analysis a lot, and then the structure or the relation with other content is important. That is main claim of Now. So I think it's basically the same for me. And probably the slight the difference is that this I don't know, maybe almost the same. There are no difference probably. I don't know, but what do you feel?
So
yeah.
So I think the structure of the Korea structure means it uses the full brain network or full brain information, right? So I think local and so in this studies, the structure means the local, emphasize the local network, but the Korea structured network means I think the global ignition or full brain and networks complexity and amounts. So is it same or I think that for Korea structures information calculation, we also use the local information like this, right?
So this is my interpretation and understanding of this Korea structure project. But what you need to be careful, or you need to be you need to know is that in this paper the local connection is important for specific content of consciousness. So in this case, face, and only the face, I mean. So this should not include, let's say, body or hands, let's say wares and the scene, background scene and things like that. And this paper in that sense says that for face, or for having the feeling of face, FFA is essential. But in a ecological or naturalistic scene, you have many features or the objects in one conscious experience. So that kind of local structure will be distributed across brain, and then these local structure should be somehow integrated, connected to have one conscious experience. So in that sense, this paper does not say that the global activation is, is not important for conscious content of consciousness, of having conscious experience. So this is, we can say exactly the same thing for the Korea structure, project. So if you are considering the face perception, face conscious experience, then FFA will be the first place to be investigated. But if you want to add more, you need to consider other regions, and then in the end, these structure should be form one big structure instead of the separated local structures. That's my understanding. So I'm not sure whether you agree with this or not, but
yeah, I see and I understand your explanation. So, and I also have a question. So the Korea structures, the experience Korea structures focus is larger or bigger or more more general than these papers said, right? So in this paper, the authors the focus on the specific, the face perception, face conscious content. So face area is important, but also the other area is also important. But so facial FFA is most important. So local structure is important, right? And the Korea structure's point is not only the experience or Korea or this creativity. So not only the local network, but also the general or global or full brain network is important, right?
so again, this is my understanding, but I think in the Korea structure project, they did not mention or distinguish the local versus or specific and non-specific, or the combination of specific content. However, in this paper, the author says that for one specific content, this local region is important, local connection is important. So not sure like how now and other people think about this, but they're just a more rough or vague idea. I mean, the Korea structure, what they want to emphasize is that not focusing on single object or single specific category. You should consider relation with other all possibilities, and that kind of the network of possibilities, or the network of, let's say, the similarity with other object is important for connecting Korea domain and the neural substrate of consciousness domain. So in that sense, I think basically the same, and this paper is a bit more specific. That's the only difference. I don't know. This is, again, all my interpretation and understanding of the Korea structure, so I might be wrong. But yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you. I see.
Yeah. Aniko, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I guess I'm still a bit like struggling with kind of integrating this view into more complex, contents of consciousness. Like I don't really think that or justify to some introspection. My conscious experience doesn't seem to be so kind of modular, or like the author says in the beginning, it is integrating many different phenomena. And I'm struggling to understand whether we should look at, or how does this approach works with actually integrating multiple aspects of a conscious experience. So is this geometrical, is the similarity structure between the different modalities, do they add, or are they added together, or they are completely separated, or because this is what I don't understand. Like, let's say I understand that people can do similarity ratings and they can do similarity judgments in different modalities. But does that mean that they also do that during their everyday life? I don't know. What do you think?
So, first of all, I think this paper does not say how different modality can be binded. That's the first thing. So, I mean, my explanation was just an interpretation of this paper, and the binding is done by the ignition, so can be wrong. So, but I understand what you mean, or why you feel a bit confused, because let's say in this paper, the author focus on phase, but how come can we experience only phase, right? It's not possible, right? So in that sense, it's a bit unclear, but I think the important point is that, okay, but if you have a, whole, or you have a whole brain, but, when you, get damaged in a specific regions, you can lose a specific content, but do not lose everything, right? And that implies that, that is, that information is encoded locally, not globally distributed. It makes sense or not. But like, let's say in the case of the phase, the FFA, the region in FFA can, result in the loss of, phase perception, prosopagnosia, but it does not lose, let's say, like object categorization, for example. That implies that, for phase, not the whole region, but rather the specific region of the brain is important. I think that's their point.
Yeah, but then this. So I am not 100% familiar with the exact experiences of people with prosopagnosia. But my understanding is that they kind of stop perceiving it as a human face as a whole, and just start to see it as like these tiny parts, but they are not integrated together. as kind of like the concept of face or the category of face. And I think that's like, it is, so of course we do have a lot of different regions that seem to be more specific and kind of responsible or play a key role in certain type of, like certain aspects of processing some kind of information. And I know, for example, it is also like there are some evolutionary pressures as well. So I know that there was a study on dogs, and they have also found a fusiform face area that responds to humans actually, or human faces, which is quite interesting. But then I don't know. So I'm just wondering about, you know, concepts like love or emotions, or you know, some kind of, I don't know, poetry or music or more I don't know, substantial or more complex phenomenon. I'm pretty sure we cannot find a single brain region that responds for, or that is kind of that processes the emotion of, I don't know, jealousy or something like that. And if you kind of lesion that, then you will never feel jealous, but you feel all the different other emotions. And so I don't know, it's I guess it's difficult to understand, or difficult to know what is the exact category, or what is the level of category that the author kind of needs or wants to localize among all the potential conscious contents of consciousness. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So when you say category, what is the category, right? You can say face is one category, but why face constitute as a one category, right? So that's a bit, or how can we define a category? That's a, you know, very tricky part. And depending on your way of categorizations, you know, the region you're focusing on can be different, right? Because let's say your example of jealousy is a specific, you know, aspect of emotion. But let's say if you consider emotion as a whole, or just, you know, negative part of emotions, or more specific anger or jealous or sadness or things like that. So depending on the categorization, the area can be different. So how localized can be different. That's a very, you know, difficult to answer question, I think. So Ryoichi, do you want to say anything? No? No? And Aniko, how about you?
Yeah, I think, yeah, this was definitely a very good like paper to, like, it has discussed a lot of different experimental findings. So very interesting. But again, I can't say that I'm 100% understood or know how this perspective can be implemented. So yeah, I'm curious to hear more.
Okay, then so we can finish, you know, discussion now, and see you next week. Bye bye.